It's 6 p.m. on a Wednesday here in Korea, coming to you live from our studio in Seoul. I'm Daniel Chef for Arirang News. Let's start with the headlines. President Park Geun-hye checked up on a list of 24 reform tasks carried out in 2015. Some progress was made, but still, there's a lot more to be done. Korea will announce a formal end to the outbreak of Middle East respiratory syndrome at midnight. The deadly virus has taken 38 lives since the first case was confirmed on May 20th. The longest unsettled case at Korea's Constitutional Court ends with the court refusing to hear a petition on the constitutionality of a 1965 treaty that is related to forced labor during Japan's colonial rule of Korea. President Park Geun-hye got an overview of some of the key reform achievements made this year. She also called on lawmakers to immediately pass bills on reviving the economy, emphasizing that it's crucial to help improving people's livelihoods. Song Ji-sun starts us off.
President Park Geun-hye chaired a meeting on the progress of our administration's key reform tasks. The goals were laid out at the start of the year and involve a range of things from making strategic use of free trade deals to establishing a channel of cooperative exchanges with Pyongyang. President Park noted the achievements made, such as the restructuring of pension plans for public workers and the completion of a national network of innovation centers aimed at supporting startups. She also renewed her call for lawmakers to pass a slew of pending economic reform bills, saying that legislation related to people's livelihoods is not a right but a duty of the National Assembly.
노동개혁은 우리 청년들의 생존이 달려있는 문제인 만큼 어떤 이유로도 정쟁의 대상이 될 수 없고 정략적 흥정이나 거래의 수단이 되어서도 안 됩니다. 만약 국회의 비협조로 노동개혁이 좌초된다면 역사의 심판에서 벗어날 수 없게 될 것이라고 생각합니다.
The major labor reforms, including the adoption of a wage peak system and flexible work hours at public organizations, are aimed at creating more jobs for young people. Korea's youth unemployment rate hovered at over 8% in November, with about 1 in 5 people between the ages of 15 and 29 have given up looking for a job and are reportedly not employed in school or in training. Ordinary citizens and working-level officials also attended Wednesday's meeting to offer their ideas for next year's policies. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
Korea's top central banker says the recent rate hike in the U.S. won't necessarily prompt Korea to make any adjustment of its own. While the Fed's decision is important, it's just one of many factors to be considered. Kim Min-ji shares with us Lee Ju-yeol's comments on the possibilities of raising rates.
There will be no immediate raise in Korea's interest rates. That's according to Bank of Korea Governor Lee Ju-yeol, who says the recent rate hike in the U.S. is just one of many factors the central bank needs to take into account when considering adjustments to Korea's rate policy. Last week, the U.S. Federal Reserve raised rates by 0.25 percentage point, lifting it into the range of 0.25 to 0.5%. Lee said although the normalization of U.S. monetary policy will likely have an impact on the flow of capital as well as exchange rate fluctuations, the global financial market is showing signs of stability.
The central bank seems to be brushing off concerns about the economic impact of the U.S. rate hike. It should be all right to leave a gap of about a year before Korea follows suit. At the moment, household debt is too high, and due to weak global growth, it won't be easy for the central bank to lift rates.
However, some analysts have said the Korea Central Bank must raise its own rates to prevent a massive capital outflow. That, coupled with uncertainties in emerging markets and slow growth in China, could spell trouble for the country. The Bank of Korea says, however, it will continue to assess the current macroeconomic situation as well as local conditions in deciding whether to adjust Korea's key rate. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Predictable in its unpredictability, that's North Korea for you. But a South Korean institute has tried to make sense of what could come based on the regime's past patterns. Connie Kim zooms in on a possible surprise move ahead of its rare Workers' Party Congress in May.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un could seek a breakthrough in inter-Korean relations through summit talks around the time of its 7th Workers' Party Congress in May, the first since 1980. The prediction was offered by the Institute for National Security Strategy, which added the regime needs tangible achievements to announce at the meeting, especially given its disappointing economic figures. North Korea's growth has been on a downward trend since the 1.3% it logged in 2012, the first year into Kim Jong-un's reign. To boost its economy, North Korea has reportedly sent 50,000 workers abroad, who have brought the regime an estimated $300 million. Another source of revenue for the North was the Mount Kumgang tour program, which has been stalled since 2008 after a South Korean tourist was shot there. The North has sought to revive the program, but the institute has suggested that could be a barrier to the resumption of inter-Korean ties. Many experts in South Korea have also said an inter-Korean summit may not be possible.
The recent inter-Korean vice-ministerial level meeting failed to bring agreement on regular family reunions for war-separated families and resumption of the Mount Kumgang tour program. President Park Geun-hye has also made clear that she will not hold talks for talk's sake, meaning the prospects for a third inter-Korean summit are very low.
While an inter-Korean summit remains a question mark for now, many observers in Seoul say the meeting will either cement Kim Jong-un's grip on power or challenge his leadership. But the outcome will depend on the announcements made during the event. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
South Korea's foreign minister made some bold comments regarding North Korea's denuclearization and revealed the ministry's plans for finding a solution to the issue of Japan's wartime sex slavery issue. Lee Soo-eun brings us the report on South Korea's diplomatic progress this year and a preview for 2016.
There will be progress on the denuclearization of North Korea early next year. That's according to Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se, who was speaking at a forum on Wednesday hosted by the Korea Broadcasting Journalists Club. He emphasized South Korea's determination to re-engage the North by opening up the possibility of multilateral talks.
South Korea will consider dynamic forms of discussion with the North that include the US, Japan, and China, or all of them, but not just the six-party talks. We are expecting more progress early next year.
The six-party talks, the main forum for dialogue on the North's denuclearization that involved the two Koreas, the US, Japan, China, and Russia, were last held in December 2008. Minister Yoon also stressed the importance of the international community's role in persuading North Korea to denuclearize.
It is vital for the UN Security Council to get more involved in North Korea's denuclearization. The international community creates circumstances in which North Korea might think there is no option other than denuclearization, like Iran did.
Regarding recent talks on the issue of sexual slavery by the Japanese military during World War II, the foreign minister acknowledged that there is a slight delay and asked for more time to resolve the matter, as the government is doing its utmost to bring about a compromise with Japan. Lee Soo-eun, Arirang News.
Less than 6 hours from now, Korea will call an official end to the outbreak of the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, or MERS, following guidelines set by the World Health Organization. Kim Ji-yeon brings us the details.
When the clock strikes midnight on December 24th, Korea will declare a formal end to the outbreak of Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, 7 months after the country's first case was confirmed. The Ministry of Health and Welfare said the decision follows guidelines set by the World Health Organization. The international body suggests an end of transmission can be declared 28 days after the last patient either fully recovers or dies. 28 days is double the maximum incubation period for MERS. The country's last MERS patient, a man who had been suffering from cancer, died from MERS-related complications on November 25th. The ministry says it will continue to be on alert since new cases are still being reported in Middle Eastern countries. It also says it'll improve its readiness to deal with such outbreaks in the future. Earlier this month, authorities lowered the country's alert from yellow to blue, which is the country's lowest alert level. First confirmed on May 20th in Korea, the respiratory disease claimed 38 lives and infected nearly 190 people. During the outbreak, thousands of people were quarantined at home or in medical facilities to prevent secondary and tertiary infections. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Korea's Constitutional Court says a decades-old treaty between Korea and Japan regarding compensation for Korean victims forced into labor during Japan's colonial rule is not subject to being ruled on its constitutionality in a verdict issued this Wednesday. Kwon So-hwa brings us the details.
Complainant Lee Yoon-jae, whose father died due to forced labor for Japanese companies during Japan's 1910 to 1945 colonial rule of Korea, filed a case to Korea's Constitutional Court in November 2009, saying that a 1965 treaty between Korea and Japan is unconstitutional. It was the longest case to stay unsettled at Korea's Constitutional Court. What came out in Wednesday's verdict is that there is to be no change to the bilateral agreement. At issue was whether Article 1, Clause 2 of the treaty, the Korea-Japan Claims Settlement Agreement, violates the property, rights, and interests of individuals. If the court had ruled in Lee's favor, Japanese companies may have been made responsible for compensating individuals who were forced to work for them during the colonial period. Tokyo claims the issue was settled by the 1965 treaty, a point made again by Japanese Foreign Minister Fumio Kishida on Tuesday when he said he would be keeping a close eye on the ruling, although without making a prediction about the outcome. The court's decision is receiving extra attention in both Korea and Japan, as this year marks the 50th anniversary of diplomatic ties between the two countries, whose relations since then have been repeatedly strained by historical and territorial issues.
So with this decision, probably the individual's pursuit of the suit will have some obstacles, but with this decision, probably the relations between Korea and Japan will be, in a sense, kind of smoothened, which does not mean that talk about or talk on the issue of comfort woman issue will be improved much. But as I mentioned, there are many difficulties yet left. But I think it could give a good signal that we can pursue to solve on the issue of comfort woman issue.
Korea's Foreign Affairs Ministry said it had no specific reaction to the ruling, but earlier in the day, Seoul's Foreign Affairs Minister Yoon Byung-se had expressed his hope for a, quote, wise decision by the court, saying as the world is getting smaller, these kinds of issues are no longer limited to individual countries, but that the world is watching. Kwon So-hwa, Arirang News.
Volkswagen Korea has issued a recall for almost 26,000 cars because of a mechanical defect that could prevent airbags from deploying during an accident. Korea's Transport Ministry said Wednesday the problem is with the steering wheel clock spring, which could tear an electrical cable connecting the driver's front airbag. The defect can also cause the vehicle's horn to malfunction. 8 models made between the year 2010 and 2014 are affected, including the Passat Tiguan and the Golf. Another 1,200 Passat cars are being recalled due to a software bug that is affecting engine and braking performance. These recalls are unrelated to the emissions rigging scandal that rocked the German automaker earlier this year. Recalls for that issue will begin sometime next year on 125,000 cars in Korea alone. A survivor has been rescued 67 hours after the landslide that collapsed an industrial estate in the southern Chinese city of Shenzhen on Sunday. According to China's Xinhua news agency, the 19-year-old man was found at around 3:30 a.m. local time Wednesday and freed from the rubble 3 hours later. He was conscious, but his legs had been crushed. He is the only survivor to have been found so far. Another body has been discovered close by, only the second death to be confirmed so far. More than 70 people are still missing after 33 buildings were destroyed by the landslide, a mix of mud and construction waste from a man-made dump site that became unstable and collapsed after heavy rains. A record number of refugees have poured into the European Union this year, especially from war-torn Syria. And the number of asylum seekers expected to be even bigger next year. Member countries are already struggling to cope with the situation. For this report, let's turn to our Son Jung-in.
According to a joint statement released by the UN Refugee Agency and the International Organization for Migration, More than 1 million refugees have entered the European Union so far this year, either by land or sea. The figure is a fourfold increase from last year, largely driven by Syrians fleeing the civil war in their home country. Amid the worsening crisis, the UN Security Council unanimously passed a resolution Tuesday demanding Syrian authorities immediately open up access routes for humanitarian aid. Of more than 13.5 million people in need of food and medical assistance in Syria, the Council said nearly 400,000 people are trapped in besieged areas, unable to receive aid. Calls are growing for a massive resettlement of hundreds of thousands of Syrian and other refugees in the EU. However, there are concerns as member countries are already overwhelmed with the situation. Germany, which received the highest number of asylum applications in the EU, has seen a surge in crimes committed against refugees. According to the country's Interior Ministry, more than 1,600 offenses have been reported this year, including physical and verbal attacks and property damage. The figure is almost double the number from last year. 손정인, Arirang News.
That's all we have for you at this hour. As always, thank you for watching.